So we're talking about how populations evolve in this chapter. We're talking about how alleles change in a population and how that affects the percentage of a population that has a particular phenotype. Now, one thing that's important to remember is that evolution can occur without natural selection. And we talk about that in the Hardy-Weinberg section. Some of the ways that evolution can occur outside of selection, ways that allele frequencies can change in a population. But one of the most important factors in evolution is natural selection. It's important to remember that evolution can occur without natural selection, but natural selection is the only cause of adaptive evolution. And what I mean by that is that natural selection is the only way to increase specific traits in a population. And those traits become more prevalent in a population because they are advantageous. So there are definitely other ways to cause a population to evolve, but natural selection is by far the largest, and it's the only way, the only process that is directed. It's the only situation where you get a trend in traits. Traits that are advantageous are accumulated rather than just random changes. So there are three different ways that natural selection works depending on how the phenotype is selected. One of those is directional selection. So this means that a population changes towards one extreme or the other. So if we have a population of mice that range in their fur color from very light to sort of medium brown to very dark, we have this range. Directional selection is going to select for one or the other extremes. So in a particular situation, it looks like this mouse population is more advantageous if you have a darker color. So our selection, our natural selection is going to work to increase the frequency of dark colored mice, and it's going to work to decrease the frequency of light colored mice. So we're moving in one particular direction or the other. So on our chart here, we can see that change from the original population to the evolved population. We can also have disruptive selection. In disruptive selection, the sort of mid-range traits in a range of traits are selected against. So if our last situation was, say, a dark environment where mice are living on dark soil and dark leaf litter and things, those dark mice are going to be selected for. But let's say these mice are living in a patchy situation, a situation where you have some dark soil, some light soil, some sun, some shade. And so being light allows you to survive in some parts of that environment, and being dark allows you to survive in others. Those middle traits are not as advantageous as either one of those, and so those traits are going to decrease in frequency. So we disrupt our nice bell curve here. So if this is our original population, we decrease the intermediate individuals and we increase the two extremes. We can also have stabilizing selection, which is sort of the opposite of disruptive. In stabilizing selection, you select against the extremes and for the intermediate. So in this case, we lose our light or dark colored mice, but we keep our mice in the intermediate color. So this is showing the exact intermediate color, but you can see that there might be some individuals who are slightly darker or slightly lighter, but the really dark ones or the really light ones are selected against. So this might mean that the population has moved into, say, a lighter color soil with less shade. So you don't need that dark environment, but you don't need the light color the dark fur, but you don't need the light color that you would on, say, light colored sand. We can also have something called balancing selection. Balancing selection is related to heterozygote advantage. So balancing selection is where you're it's basically you're selecting for the heterozygote. You're not selecting out either one of the homozygous situations, but you're selecting for the heterozygote. And this happens when the heterozygote has an advantage over either homozygous genotype. And so this results in a higher frequency of heterozygote individuals. So sickle cell anemia is a perfect example of this. The sickle cell disease will affect individuals who are homozygous recessive. Generally, individuals aren't going to survive very well with this disorder, and so they are going to be selected against. In regions with malaria, though, individuals with sickle cell trait or sickle cell who are heterozygous for sickle cell actually have an advantage. So in this area, if you have sickle cell, you're probably not going to survive. But if you are infected by malaria, you're not going to survive either. So the heterozygote advantage with sickle cell is that malaria has trouble infecting sickle cell hemoglobin. And so the effects of malaria are not nearly as bad as if you were homozygous normal for your hemoglobin. So if you were not a carrier, you didn't have sickle cell, and you're just normal, you're going to be affected by malaria. And that's going to select against the individuals who are homozygous normal for the sickle cell allele. So individuals who are homozygous recessive are selected against because they have sickle cell. Individuals who are homozygous dominant are selected against because they can contract malaria. But the heterozygote advantage here is that malaria isn't so bad. The effects of some of the sickle cell hemoglobin is not so bad. And so the heterozygotes actually survive much better than either of the homozygous individuals in this situation. Final type of selection is sexual selection. So this is probably the one that you guys are most common with. In sexual selection, individuals select their mate based on a particular trait. So an individual has an advantage, a mating advantage, an advantage in passing on their traits if they have a particular desirable characteristic. Now this is important because it produces something called sexual dimorphism, which is differences between males and females. And I don't mean sex organs and sex development. I mean secondary characteristics, differences that are characteristics of males in general versus females in general. So throughout the animal kingdom, males tend to be bigger, they tend to be showier. You can absolutely find examples to the contrary, but in general, males are bigger, they're stronger, they just have different features than females. So this can be size, it can be color, it can be ornamentation, it can be behavior. There are lots of ways that individuals are sexually dimorphic. We've got two examples here on the bottom. You have the mane in this line in the male lions. The male lions are bigger, they have this big mane around their face, and when females are selecting a mate, they use that trait as an indication that this is a big, healthy male. He has good genes. They're not thinking about the genes, but they're thinking this is a desirable male to mate with. And the biological idea is that if you are mating with a big, strong, healthy male that can support all this extra hair and this weight and this big body, then they probably have good genes to pass on. Same thing with this peacock. The males have this big, huge, showy plumage for their tail feathers, and that is used to attract mates. So females see this as good genes, as a good, hardy mate to pass on to their genes to the next generation. So in sexual selection, individuals are competing for the opposite sex, and they're choosing their mate based on specific characteristics that they find desirable. And the reason is that females are correlating certain genes with overall good health of the male. So I have a couple of examples here. We've got antler on deer, we've got tusks on these male walruses, beautiful plumage in a bird of paradise and this wood duck. I think that's a wood duck. If it's not, don't hold it against me. And then these large horns in the ram. So there are tons and tons of examples of this. This is probably the best example of natural selection, that females are choosing these traits. And so if you're being chosen for, say, your large antlers, and you have a gene that produces large antlers, the next generation of males might have slightly larger antlers, or if not, they're going to continue these large antlers, whereas males who have smaller antlers are going to be less likely to breed.